The Guardians lead the ALDS 1-0, a game they desperately needed, and I'll explain why they desperately need it, but everything went right. Nothing could go wrong. The first 5 batters of the game, the first 5, all got on base like that. Or got to home plate, I should say. They all scored, not just on base. They all scored, and Andres Gimenez was close, but he got on base. The first 6 batters got on base, and the first 5 batters scored. Unbelievable way to start a game with nobody out, I remind you. That's where the Guardians scored a majority of their runs this afternoon, plus 2 late in the game thanks to a David Fry RBI double for 2 runs. We'll explain all that and more, how on fire the bullpen was, how great Tanner Bybee looked, even though there was still some flashes of maybe he's got to work on some stuff. But other than that, he got out of a jiffy, and he pitched 4 for 2/3 innings. Everything went right for the Guardians. It's Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. As always, like and subscribe, and of course, check me out on social media. Instagram, Hoty Raw Takes. Facebook, Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Twitter, @HotyAndrew, my regular Twitter. For more updates on the show and more, and my sports thoughts. I have quite a few of them quite frequently, but we do this podcast around twice a week. So let's get right to my reaction on today's game. Unbelievable performance by the Guardians. Steven Kwan leading it off for us like he typically does. It looked like back to vintage Steven Kwan we saw earlier on in the season, even though we haven't seen too much of him as of late, but when we did see him, he wasn't very good in recent games. You talk about a guy like David Fry, he got a walk right away, but he had a 2 RBI hit. It looked like vintage David Fry as well. Jose Ramirez getting the job done early. Josh Naylor getting the job done early. No slugging from either one of them, but man, oh man, was Lane Thomas the hero today with that 3-run homer to give the Guardians a 5-0 lead. Unbelievable way to get going for the Guardians. And it really paid off because we see Tariq Skubal next in Game 2, and I am nervous about that. I am very nervous about that. So I'm celebrating today. But would I say the Guardians are going to win this series yet? I still have my doubts. I do. I picked Detroit to win this series in 5 games. And it's because they have Skubal for 2 of them. Game 2 in Cleveland and Game 5 likely in Cleveland. Skubal's going to be their guy. So if the Guardians want to win this series, I think it's going to have to go forward. You're going to have to steal both those games in Detroit, which could be a tough place to play. I'm not so sure the Guardians are going to win this series, but a lot of what I saw today makes me believe they can absolutely compete for a World Series and possibly win this series. Yeah, absolutely. They got to take advantage of those games in Detroit. That's my feeling. I'm not going to pencil in the L for the Guardians just yet because they haven't played Tariq Skubal, and maybe they hit off him well. I mean, he did lose 4 times this year, so Skubal's going to give up some hits at some point, right? And this is the spotlight. This is the Major League Baseball playoffs. Skubal hasn't been there before. Neither did Tanner Bybee, and Tanner Bybee did pretty good. Tanner Bybee, I don't think is Skubal by any stretch of the imagination, but Tanner Bybee, man, oh man, did he pitch well today in those 4 2/3 innings he was out there. So, I mean, anything's possible in the Major League Baseball playoffs. We've come to see it. The Houston Astros streak of getting to the ALCS is over. I almost penciled them in to actually get to the Guardians in this series. Part of me is kind of more relieved we have Detroit. Will Detroit's gas run out? That'll be the question. They have a lot of questions to still answer, obviously. They scored 0 runs today, which leads you to ask questions about their batters. Like Colt Keith. Colt Keith, he was awful today at the plate. Everybody was able to strike that guy out or fly him out. I mean, Colt Keith was terrible. Terrible at the plate today. Offensively, like Torkelson, as I said, is a guy I think a lot of people had high expectations for this year. But Torkelson isn't any surprise kind of hitter. This is a team that likes to hit singles. I mean, Verling's another guy. Matt Verling likes to hit singles. I mean, he's an okay hitter for the most part. But the Guardians got to that guy today. The Astros weren't able to get to those guys for the most part. I mean, so for me, I look at the Guardians and say, you got the first win in the postseason. Stephen Vogt, his first postseason victory as a manager. I'm happy for that. I'm clapping. I saw a lot of flashes of this team being a World Series contender. What I did see today was a team that can compete with the Yankees in the ALCS. I'll say that right off the rip. I am convinced the Guardians can compete with the Yankees after what I just saw this afternoon. But at the end of the day, I'm still focusing on this one game at a time. I picked Detroit to win this series in 5 games, and I'm going to stick by it until the Guardians win this series. It's the only way. I picked Detroit to win. I picked Philadelphia to win in 5 games over the Mets. But the Mets could be tricky too. I think they got hot at the right time, but I still think Philadelphia is going to win that series. I picked the Dodgers over San Diego, but San Diego could be dangerous. I have that series going 5 games. So I think we're going to have an interesting divisional round here for all the teams. But when I look at this particular series for the Guardians and Tigers, 2 teams who are very familiar with each other, I just can't get over the fact that Skubal is the best pitcher in this series, in a sport that's all about pitching. Jose Ramirez, sure, is the best player in this series, but the best pitcher is Tarik Skubal. And if Tarik Skubal could shut a guy like Jose Ramirez down, the Guardians are in a lot of trouble. The Guardians will be in a lot of trouble, too. It's just a matter of fact. I don't see a guy like Lane Thomas hitting off Skubal like he did against Detroit's bullpen today. And I think A.J. Hinch is going to go back to the drawing board a little bit. He's going to have to put some starters out there for the Detroit games. Because if they want to win this series, they're going to have to defend their home field as well. Then if they're going to have Skubal in the 2 road games, then up in the Motor City, they better have a real legitimate starter pitching in those games compared to just Skubal the 2. Because if you want to shoe in Skubal wins game 2 and Skubal wins game 5, you got to win game 3 or game 4 as well. And I don't think you could just use the bullpen strategy the whole time. It worked against the Houston Astros, but it didn't work against the Cleveland Guardians. The Guardians exposed that today. The Guardians were a much better postseason team this year than the Houston Astros, even though the regular season series favored the Astros over the Guardians, which is another reason to be kind of relieved we don't see Houston right now. But still, this is the postseason. A.J. Hinch is an experienced manager. I think he's going to figure this out. I don't think we see a bullpen-heavy game like we saw from Detroit earlier today again. Managers are going to learn over time, and I think Stephen Vogt's learning, too, how to manage that pen, how to get Tanner Bybee out of that tricky situation, which I thought was the right decision, by the way. Even though Bybee looked a little shaky, he wanted to stay in there, I think Stephen Vogt said, we're not going to take any chances of Detroit coming back in this game, and they did the right thing. Stephen Vogt made the right call. Tanner Bybee had a good game. He had a solid outing. Let the bullpen, the weight of this team, the relievers that have gotten you win after win after win. You have the Cade Smith. You have the Tim Herron. You have the Hunter Gaddis. You have the Emmanuel Clase. And that's going to round up your lineup. And you're not going to allow any runs with that kind of bullpen. And if you do let up a run, it's probably going to be 1. Because that's how good those guys are. Cade Smith went 1 1/3. 4 strikeouts in a row. That's how good they are. Emmanuel Clase was out of that game in a jiffy. Hunter Gaddis got a double play. Tim Herron had some strikeouts too. It was a phenomenal bullpen run. It was just a phenomenal bullpen run. The Guardians have the best bullpen in baseball. It's not even close. And teams like the New York Yankees, they're going to struggle with that. Obviously, they have the option to not pitch to Juan Soto and Aaron Judge. We'll see if that happens. We'll see if they make it out of this KC series as well, because I think the Yankees' rotation is questionable outside of Garrett Cole. I really, really do. It's like Detroit. Their rotation's questionable outside of Tarik Skubal. But you're still probably going to see Garrett Cole in a championship series for 2 or 3 games. I'm sure Kansas City's got the same thing to worry about. Even though Garrett Cole is not the Garrett Cole of the Houston days, he's still Garrett Cole. I don't want to see that guy. So if I'm the Guardians, you have to be very, very careful about how you pitch around certain guys. I mean, obviously with the Tigers, you have guys that hit a bunch of singles and doubles. You do have some slugs from Colt Keith every once in a while, but what, is that their best batter? Maybe Veerling's a good batter outside of Colt Keith, but, I mean, the Tigers roster, too, with the overhaul and turnover they had at the trade deadline, to see where they are and to fight into the postseason the way they did, and now in the ALDS, they just lost 7-0. They're still playing with house money. Still, something about this series just doesn't jive right with me. I'm optimistic for the Guardians that they're going to contend because they won today and that this is not going to just be a rollover series with the Skubal games. But I'm just not sold that Detroit showed us their best today. I think Detroit is waiting. I think they're literally just rubbing their hands together saying, we have Skubal coming up. We just got to figure out a way to steal game 3 or 4. We could pencil in a win game 2 and game 5. I literally think the Detroit Tigers might be thinking that. So if I'm the Guardians, I better be prepared. A, you want to win game 2. So try to hit off Skubal as hard as you can. Get Jose going. Get Josh Naylor going. Heck, even if you can't hit off Skubal, make him go 100 pitches within 7 innings, have Hinch pull him, and then you have another guy go in from the Detroit bullpen. They've been pretty good. Try to win a game 1-0 for all I care. I mean, at this point, I don't want to see Skubal a second time, and you're already going to have to see him once on Monday. So I'm nervous about Game 2 on Monday. That's going to be the real test for the Guardians. And if they can overcome it, this team can 100% compete with the New York Yankees and get to the World Series. No matter who they play in the World Series. I could see them compete with the Dodgers. I could see them compete with the New York Mets if they find a way to make it. I don't think they're going to get out of that Phillies series, but still, I could see them competing with the Phillies. They played the Phillies really well this year. I could see them competing with the San Diego Padres, who have a really good bullpen too. And now that the Milwaukee Brewers are eliminated, I'm confident if they see a team just like the Philadelphia Phillies or the Los Angeles Dodgers or any of those teams that they can compete with them. The Yankees series is still a little bit more kind of intact. I mean, it's tough. It really is. We'll just have to see how this all plays out. I think the Royals have a good shot because their starting pitching, I think, is actually better than the Yankees. But that's a team of a bad bullpen, and they're playing against the Yankees, who also have a bad bullpen. The edge in the AL bullpen-wise is absolutely the Guardians. And to a degree, the Detroit Tigers. Late in those games, you just don't want to hit against those guys. They're all that good. And the Yankees and the Royals, you got to have a confident in a comeback possibly, because that's how bad the bullpens are. So today was a statement win for the Guardians that they are going to contend for a championship. But does that mean they're going to get out of this series? I'm still questioning it. I want to see them play really well against Skubal. And if that means they get 1 run out of it or 2 runs out of it, but they still find a way to win the game, I am happy with that. And I think we could take the series in the Motor City. But A.J. Hinch is going to be making some adjustments, and if you're the Guardians, you want to get out of this series as soon as you can. You have already the 1 win. Obviously, you want to win Game 2 and force the Tigers into a situation where they have to win one of those Motor City games. But right now, if I'm the Guardians, I'm thinking 4 is the best way out of this series. If not, I think the Tigers steal a game on the road on Monday, and then possibly steal Game 5 and obviously defend home field Game 3 or 4. This series is still very, very tricky. But once again, the Guardians get all the props in the world for being absolutely on fire. They were absolutely on fire today. Almost nothing went wrong. And Lane Thomas, as I've been so harsh about Lane Thomas, and I was harsh to the Guardians front office about how bad of a trade it was. Once we got him here and 2-3 weeks went by in the season, and I just needed to be patient. Lane Thomas cashed in the check today, and the Guardians absolutely spent the money. It was ridiculous how good that trade now looks in hindsight. It won them a playoff game, and maybe he can win us another one. This ride has been wild, and I still feel like it would be dirty if the Guardians don't find a way to at least win this playoff series. If they don't win the World Series, I'm almost okay with that, as long as they just don't get 1 playoff series. The kind of season they've had, I'm hoping they win a playoff series at the very least. But as I said before, the season's already been a success. Anything else is just more sugar to the sundae. It's the cherry on top. And I'm totally fine with that. Like I said before, other series going on right now, Philadelphia and the Mets. You also look at the Dodgers and San Diego, a California series. And if you look back in the American League, Kansas City and New York. I took the Royals in that series, even though they played the Yankees poor in the regular season, because I just think the Royals' pitching is really good, and I think they have a better lineup. They have more guys in their lineup compared to the Yankees. I mean, I've been getting some flack a little bit for saying the Yankees just have a 2-man lineup because you look at Jazz Chisholm Jr., and I'm not as sold on Jazz Chisholm Jr. as a lot of other people are. I still think it's Juan Soto and Aaron Judge, and that's about it. And Garrett Cole is your leadoff guy. That's just how I view the New York Yankees. It's still a possible way to get you a World Series, but injury news keeps coming up for the Yankees as well. To me, the Yankees, I don't think are going to win the World Series. Somewhere around the line, they're going to slip. And it may be in the World Series. I just don't see it, which is why I picked the Kansas City Royals to beat them. And as I said, if Kansas City wins, it's great for the AL Central because a guaranteed AL Central ALCS will happen, which I think will drive Major League Baseball mad as long as the Mets don't somehow find their way there, or Philly, or one of the bigger markets. They want those big markets, obviously, there, knowing the Major League Baseball office. So, to me, it's going to be an interesting playoff run. I think the Guardians, as an organization, are one of the top tier from what we have left in the playoff field. Obviously, the Yankees and the Dodgers are in a league by themselves. Philadelphia is pretty much in a league by itself, too. I mean, San Diego has kind of turned a lot of something into nothing and nothing into something at certain times, but they still have no World Series titles in their entire franchise history for their 50-year-plus franchise history, so they're one of the newer-ish teams in baseball. And you also look at a team like the New York Mets, who essentially were starting from scratch this year from what it looked like, and kind of got hot at the end of the year, and the Mets are a pretty good team. I'm not going to hide that. They are a pretty good team. I thought they were going to be a lot worse than the 6th seed in the Major League Baseball playoff field. So the Mets have had a successful season too. And a lot of the pleasant surprises we've seen. The Mets are one of them. The Royals, even though they're in our division, that's still a pleasant surprise after they lost 100-plus games last year. The Detroit, I mean, at the end of the season, yes, they were a pleasant surprise for the Tigers. But, I mean, if you saw the Tigers last year, you could see there was some significant improvement from where they were just 4 or 5 years ago. I think if you look at the season that Milwaukee has had, they've been a really big disappointment now that they're not in the divisional series. I think if you look at teams like Philadelphia overtaking Atlanta, because the Braves were just injury-ridden. I don't think anyone thought Philadelphia was just going to be leading the 2nd seed in the ALDS, but Philadelphia, they're a good team too. I mean, a lot's gone right for certain teams, and there's been a lot of pleasant surprises in baseball this year. A lot of pleasant surprises. So we'll have to see how this pans out. If I were to pick my World Series right now, the one I would want to see, I'd want to see Guardians-Mets. Just because my mom's a Mets fan, so I have to throw that out there, because she's from Long Island. She has a big history with the Mets. And so, personally, I guess, having her team play my team, go back and forth, she's a Guardians fan too, but you know what I mean. That to me would be special, just for my home sake. But also, if I were to pick based on my brain, I'd probably say like Detroit Tigers right now because of Scooble, and the Los Angeles Dodgers. That would be my World Series pick. Will it happen? I don't know. It remains yet to be seen. But my oh my, this is going to be fun. And the Guardians have 1 win under their belt. They just need 3 more to get to the ALCS. And as I said many, many times before, who would have thought at this point of the season they would be this far? Guardians already had a successful year, but to me, winning 1 series will just be enough to say, oh my goodness, they went really above and beyond. They already went above and beyond, but above and beyond, I will say. Go Guardians. What a game today, and hopefully they're able to steal one of those Scooble games. We'll have to see what takes place on Monday. All right, I don't want to make everybody sad now, but we have to talk about the Cleveland Browns and their upcoming game with the Washington Commanders. And I say that because the Browns as an entire unit are garbage. There's nothing about the Browns right now I like, minus the defense, really. I mean, there's nothing. There's so much talent on this team that's going to waste because there's significant problems here and there, and Deshaun Watson, a lot of the media and the pundits are saying that he had one of his better games, which I think he did against the Raiders, but it still was not enough. Something is wrong fundamentally with this Cleveland Browns team. And tomorrow against the Washington Commanders, a team where everything has gone right to start the year for them, minus their Week 1 loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That was pretty bad, but other than that, everything has gone right for them. How could I pick the Browns to win that game in Washington? With a fan base that I think is underrated, by the way, and that goes back to the days before they were the Commanders. I mean, that team was absolutely unbelievably poor for so long, and the fans still showed up and showed out, just like we do here in Cleveland. Washington for a long time has had an incredibly passionate fan base for years and years and years. For years and years and years. An underrated fan base, in my opinion. And now they're really excited because the Daniel Snyder era is past them, and they're on to this new Dan Quinn era with Jaden Daniels at quarterback, and Jaden Daniels probably the best quarterback they've seen since Robert Griffin III, and Robert Griffin III only had 1 good season. So this is like the best moment in Washington football in 11, 12 years. And they haven't won a Super Bowl since the 90s. So the Commanders right now, they're on cloud 9, and they want to keep this rolling. And it's going to be on the Browns to try to stop it and get a win they desperately need. We know historically teams only have about a 15% chance if they start 1-3 to make the playoffs. You essentially have no chance if you start 0-4. They're 1-3, so they're not 1-4 yet. There's no reason to get that far down into it. And they didn't start 0-4, so that also helps them. But to me, the Browns, they're not really well disciplined because the penalties are insane. The offensive line is garbage. It's just garbage. There's nothing about the offensive line right now that excites me. When we get Jed Wills Jr. and Jack Conklin, who needs to stay healthy for an entire Brown season, back into the line, then I would have somewhat more confidence. But to me, there's still holes everywhere else. There's still holes everywhere else. David Njoku at tight end. That would be great if we can get him back tomorrow. We can't get a running game going. And I'm sick of Kevin Stefanski believing that Jerome Ford is any good. He's average to below average. I haven't seen any electricity from Jerome Ford. Kevin Stefanski, please do me a favor and run Deontay Foreman a little bit more. When Pierre Strong gets healthy, run him more. When Nick Chubb gets healthy, obviously run him more. I don't see it in Jerome Ford, and I don't know this obsession to keep trying to make him the guy. I don't think he is. I've seen more highlights from Pierre Strong. So I'm not going to get too emotional about that on Stefanski because I still think he's a great head coach. But right now, I think play calling is in over his head right now. I'm not willing to jump and say give it to Ken Dorsey because I think Ken Dorsey might be the worst hire of the NFL season so far in terms of the offensive coordinator. The Browns, I believe right now, I have to check it, but I believe they are the only team in the NFL that haven't scored 20-plus points in a game since Jacksonville scored 20 last week against Houston. Even the Carolina Panthers have above a 20-point game. One. In a game where Andy Dalton didn't have any film on him. So, I don't know what to say. Browns' offense is problematic. They're an accident waiting to happen. They have some great plays from scrimmage to open, but that's it. The Browns need to find a way to keep the offense on the field for sustained drives and win ball games. That's it. That's all I ask as a Cleveland Browns fan. And, of course, to run the ball more with Deontay Foreman and not Jerome Ford. Please. And when Nick Chubb gets back, please. And it's nothing personal against Jerome Ford. I just don't think he's that good. I just don't. And I think the more and more the Browns try to use Jerome Ford to be that guy, the more and more it gets exposed he's not that good. Please, Kevin Stefanski, run Deontay Foreman. Try to get a run game going. Obviously, offensive line play would help in that too. But please, just give it a shot. Run the darn ball. Even run it with Deshaun Watson. Even run it with Deshaun Watson before Jerome Ford. Please. I see the electricity that Deshaun Watson has on his legs. It's there. I don't think Deshaun Watson's been giving enough credit for his mobility. It's pretty darn good. Obviously, we have question marks about him throwing the football, and that still has to be seen over a sample size. But we can't put last week's loss on Deshaun Watson completely. I don't think we can put the Giants' loss completely on him either. The Cowboys game, I'm willing to say, yes, that's on Deshaun Watson. So, let's get something going offensively, please. I believe the defense is going to hold the other teams down to at least 24 points or less. They've been doing that for the most part this season, excluding the Cowboys game. Please get the offense going. Get this offensive line better coached. Bill Callahan, we're clearly missing him. That's obvious. Get this running game going. Get this offense going. Right now, the three worst hires in the NFL, in my opinion, for any coaching staff across the league. Offensive coordinator for the Browns, Ken Dorsey. Running backs coach, Deuce Staley. Where's the running game? Nick Chubb's coming back, so I'm not really going to harp on him that too much yet. But still, where's the running game? I won't harp on Deuce Staley too much, but still. And also the offensive line coach. Why? Why are these the three worst assistant coach hires in the league right now? That's on the Browns as an organization. And Bill Callahan left. That's not on them. But what is on them is firing Stump Mitchell, who I thought was a great running backs coach. Why? Alex Van Pelt. Yes, sure, the offense was catered more to Joe Flacco than Deshaun Watson last year. Alex Van Pelt was still the offensive coordinator in the Baltimore game. The game we won with Deshaun Watson. Alex Van Pelt, if he would have had Deshaun Watson the rest of the season, maybe could have done something more. Why'd we get rid of him now, I'm wondering in hindsight. Why? And as I said, I'm not going to fault him for Bill Callahan. He wanted to go coach with his son. The Browns are in a load of trouble right now if they don't win tomorrow. But starting 1-4 is hard. Now, you can rebound from it. Some teams have. But, oh my goodness, is this a mess? Is this a mess? And Washington right now is playing with house money. No one thought, I think, they'd be 3-1. Some people thought they could be a dark horse because they weren't sure Philadelphia and Dallas were going to stick out the way they were. They kind of look like poor teams right now. Washington looks like a legit NFC East contender. And they might be. You got to win tomorrow if you're the Browns, though. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. And one of the best games we saw Deshaun Watson play in a Cleveland Browns uniform was back in 2022 when he faced the Washington Commanders. So it's possible that he could turn it around. We'll just have to see. Over in London tomorrow, the Jets play the Vikings. Will the Vikings remain undefeated? I don't think so. I like the Jets in this game. I just think at some point the Vikings are going to come back down to earth with Sam Darnold as their quarterback. Panthers and Bears. The Bears beat the Rams last week, so they kind of opened my eyes a little bit that they may be better than I say, because I ripped Caleb Williams to shreds because I don't think he's going to be a very good quarterback. But Carolina did have one good game, but Carolina, they were playing a bad defense last week against Cincinnati to their defense, so they scored 24 points. I'll take Carolina in this game. I think Carolina has the ability to possibly do what they did to the Raiders again and keep it close with the Bears. I just think the inexperience of the Bears could still come back to bite them at some point, maybe against Carolina. Let's see. All right, first AFC North divisional matchup, I believe, of the year. It's between the Ravens and the Bengals tomorrow. I think this would have been a great primetime game, but clearly the Bengals aren't very good, and Baltimore has just been destroying teams as of late. At least the Bills. They really didn't destroy the Cowboys. They did early on, but the Cowboys kind of came back. So the Ravens have some defensive faults, but they can run the football really well with Derrick Henry. This game is in Cincinnati, and divisional games at home, I usually like to take the home team to win it. But not this time. I just think Baltimore's on another level right now, and Cincinnati has a lot of adjustments to make. I'm going to take the Ravens over the Bengals. Dolphins, Patriots. The Dolphins, I would have said, should win this game based on their history with New England in recent years, but I just think New England right now, as poor as they are, the Dolphins are a wreck. They're just a train wreck. Nothing's going right in Miami right now, and there's a lot of questions to answer. And it's not all the way the coach's fault. If anyone blames Mike McDaniel for this, I think that's absurd. And I think knowing Miami, they might. So he might get on the hot seat now that Miami's off to this rough start to the year. But I think New England right now, they're desperate for a win too, and it's at home. It's against a team that's a mess. I think the Patriots have a better shot at winning this game than the Dolphins. Colts at Jaguars. I keep saying this game's going to be the game Doug Peterson gets fired. This game's going to be the game Doug Peterson gets fired. Well, this game's going to be the game Doug Peterson gets fired. I don't see the Jacksonville Jaguars beating Indianapolis at all. I think the Colts, when they had Joe Flacco step in last week for Anthony Richardson, they showed that their offense could be explosive too with Joe Flacco. I still think Anthony Richardson has a lot of potential. For me, it's just the Colts are kind of on another level, and Jonathan Taylor running the football is going to help them too. I don't see the Jacksonville Jaguars winning this game, and this will be the game Doug Peterson goes. I just don't think that the Jacksonville Jaguars can sustain this season with Doug Peterson much longer. It's clearly a disaster already, and the Jacksonville Jaguars are essentially heading nowhere. And I'm not going to blame this all on Trevor Lawrence. I know a lot of people are. I don't think Trevor Lawrence can help the fact that the team is being coached poorly right now to essentially lose these football games. So I'm not blaming Trevor Lawrence all the way. The only real bad Trevor Lawrence game I saw, because they were in the Texans game, and they were in the game with the Browns essentially, for the most part, and they were in the Miami game. They were not in the Buffalo game. I have to blame coaching for that. So it shouldn't fall on Trevor Lawrence's shoulders. The Jaguars are going to be 0-5, and it's going to be because Doug Peterson has to go. Bills at Texans. I'm actually excited for this game. I think there is going to be a lot to see from both of these teams here. It's another test for the Bills, just like the Ravens were, and that's why I like the Texans in this game. Bring Buffalo back down to earth a little bit, because I think Buffalo was kind of playing above their head a little bit to open the season, and they had an easy schedule looking back at it. So I like the Texans to really make statement wins over some of these teams, and I think they could do that here. Raiders, Broncos. Bo Nix has been playing out of his mind a little bit, at least against Tampa Bay. It was a bad weather game last week against New York. But hey, they upset Aaron Rodgers and that tough Jet defense there by 1 point, 10-9. So it wasn't that impressive of a game. But the Broncos are well coached so far. But I think the Raiders are too. The Raiders were pretty well coached against the Browns with no Max Crosby and no Devontae Adams. And we're not sure those guys are going to be out there again. Devontae Adams reportedly wants to get out of the Raiders from what we've seen. He wants to be traded. So the Raiders feel like a sinking ship, but they also really don't. They feel like they just missed the iceberg of the Titanic. I like the Raiders in this game. Arizona at San Francisco. Now, Arizona absolutely destroyed the Rams a few weeks ago. I think they have the potential to do that to certain divisional opponents, but I don't think the 49ers are one of them, and I think the 49ers need this win. I'm going to take San Francisco at home to fend off the Cardinals. Green Bay at the Rams. I'll be honest, I'm not really impressed from what I'm seeing from Green Bay lately. And To me, the Rams, they had a lot of injuries to open the year. I think they are the 1-3 team that can overcome being 1-3. I like the Rams at home to beat Green Bay. Green Bay just doesn't feel like a good team right now. I'm starting to think Minnesota might be better than them at this point, even though, as I said, I don't believe in the Vikings all the way. But the Vikings essentially destroyed them last week. The Packers came back and tried to make it a game, but the Vikings annihilated them, and they're very well coached. I don't know if the Packers are as well coached as they were last year. And Jordan Love has been hurt, so it's not all his fault. We've seen some moments from him, but the 2 games the Packers won, Malik Willis was in, not Jordan Love. So, still remains yet to be seen. But I'm going to go with the Rams here because they desperately need to win this game. Giants and Seahawks. I mean, the Seahawks, minus the Detroit game, have won every game, obviously, and they've had a really cupcake schedule to start the season with, and I think this kind of helps them too. But the Giants did beat the Browns. If the Browns are better than we think they are, which is possible still, I think, but probably unlikely at this point to just say we have faith in the Browns anymore. So give me Seattle in this game to defeat the Giants just because I think Seattle can easily beat cupcake teams. Cowboys at Steelers. That Steeler defense is ferocious, and the Cowboys tend to struggle against defenses like that. I mean, the Browns defense was pretty tough too, and they had some short passes against the Browns and still won 33-17. So I'm going to go with the Cowboys in this game just because I think the Steelers are kind of due for a little bit of a beatdown. And I'm also rooting for that. But at the same time, I think the Steelers are not the team that we necessarily thought they were when they're 3-0. I think they're going to have some faulty play here. Let's take the Cowboys over the Steelers. Really excited about New Orleans at Kansas City. I did say Atlanta would beat Kansas City. I still think it's possible that the Chiefs go 17-0. But because that's so unlikely, they got to lose at some point, right? New Orleans has tended to go to places with a lot of pressure on them and win. And I think based on what we saw from the Falcons and Buccaneers on Thursday, which that game was incredible. I picked the Buccaneers to win. I was wrong. The Falcons won. But that game and that finish was unbelievable. One of the best games I've watched in a long, long time. Already a Game of the Year candidate. I think the Falcons are well coached. I think the Bucs are well coached. I think Baker Mayfield's good, and so is Kirk Cousins. But I can go into those 2 teams another day. I think right now as it stands, though, Kansas City's got to lose at some point. Their offense hasn't been really lighting up the world. Mahomes has been good, but I don't think we've seen Kelsey really explode yet. I'm going to take New Orleans on the road in Arrowhead to upset Kansas City. Lions, Chargers, Eagles, and Titans all with bye weeks this week as the bye weeks start to roll out. And that will be my predictions in the NFL in Week 5. And that'll do it for this edition of Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Ohio State is currently playing Iowa right now, so I'm not going to comment on that game until the next edition of Raw Takes, and I'll talk a little bit about college football then. Just because we still have a lot of college football games going on, I really wanted to get my Guardians reaction out there sooner than later. That way everybody can get to see it. But if you agree with my takes on the Guardians, please comment, reach me out to me on social media. You could, of course, also like and subscribe for more content from Raw Takes, all that and more. Also, same thing with the NFL. If you like my NFL takes, please reach out to me and let me know what you think. Guardians back in action Monday night against the Detroit Tigers. The Browns back in action tomorrow against the Washington Commanders. Ohio State, as I'm recording this, at the very least, you may be watching this later, they're taking on Iowa, hopefully heading for another win. But I'm not going to promise anything. When I saw the score, they were up, but that's as I'm recording this. So, hope everyone has a good rest of your weekend. Enjoy the slate of football for the rest of the weekend. Enjoy the baseball games too. And I'll be back next week at some point to react to the ALDS once again, and more on Week 5 and upcoming Week 6. I'm Andrew Hoty. Those are my Raw Takes. Have a good one, everybody.